I'm Donna Blanchard, and this is a ThinkTech commentary. I'd like to talk about approved government spying on civilians in France. Let's call it France's Patriot Act. France's Patriot Act has cleared the final hurdle now that the Constitutional Council has approved the legislation. The French government and intelligence is soon to have the power to use phone taps, set up hidden cameras and microphones, and conduct bulk analysis of metadata with almost no judicial oversight. Civil rights groups have argued ineffectively that the new legislation, which hasn't been updated since the advent of the widespread use of cell phones and the internet, claiming that the new law lacks sufficient checks and balances. That seems to be news to the French Parliament, which overwhelmingly approved the surveillance bill in May of this year, and it later sailed through the Senate following reaction to terrorist activity in and around Paris. In April, the French government uncovered an apparent plot to attack at least one church near Paris by a gunman who appeared to have been encouraged solely over the internet by handlers in Syria. The gunman never visited Syria, had no physical links to enlisting in a jihad, but it was determined that whereas this information was gathered more or less by fluke, it could have been intentionally gathered by means outlined in the new legislation. France has a large population that travels to Syria to wage jihad. Many of these individuals are lured, or at least communicate, with operatives in Syria via the internet. France's Constitutional Council struck down a couple of provisions of the law, but President François Hollande, who referred the legislation to the Council, stated that the rejection of those provisions did not threaten the overall balance of the law and would not prevent French intelligence services from protecting the country. Controversial provisions that have been allowed to sail through include the bulk analysis of internet metadata to track suspicious behavior, and the use in certain cases of so-called IMSI catchers, which capture all telephone, text message, and internet conversations in a given area. The United Nations Human Rights Committee has expressed concern about the legislation, saying that it grants French intelligence services excessively broad and intrusive powers without adequate and independent control mechanisms. Amnesty International calls it a major blow to human rights. So, why is it that the French appear to want to mimic America and Britain in allowing authorities to intercept and access people's communication at will? Because they're understandably afraid, and we've all learned. Our own Patriot Act, which was so broadly and understandably criticized, also helped our country protect us. That Patriot Act expired this year, and we quickly and rather handily enacted the new USA Freedom Act, which doesn't allow bulk collection of telephone records by the NSA, but does make records held by telephone companies available for broad searches by government officials with a court order. When ISIL is recruiting and directing electronically, don't we want impactful surveillance programs without government overreach? I know. To many of us, allowing the government to tap our phones sounds reprehensible. But I initially felt the same way about those X-rays you now have to go through at the airport. Pardon me, Edward Snowden, but in the grand scheme of things, I honestly don't think my contribution to the metadata, little bits and pieces of my cell phone conversations, emails, and underwire bra are so precious that I'm afraid to have that data collected to help fight terrorist activity in our world. I'm Donna Blanchard, and this has been a ThinkTech commentary.